there's a point of it. It's like, am I being too much? Right? When is it like, ooh, when is it just being cutesy? And that's really something I struggled with in the beginning. And I think the point is not to do something fun. The point is to do something from a place of care.
All right, welcome to the Building Thinkers podcast. Today I'm so excited to be joined by
Tom Goulooze.
Tom. Thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited. I think that our listeners need to start off with a funny story about how we connected or met. Ready, go.
So imagine the following scenario. We had gone as strangers to a very out there learning and development conference. And afterwards, we were feeling really peckish, but we were a group of 18. So we'd need to find a restaurant on walking distance that needed to accept 18 people, which we did, but it took like an hour of walking around. And then I just happened to be across the table from Tracy, which if you're listeners of this podcast, you know that she's incredibly engaging and also makes facial movements that are really inviting that you may go, oh. So we got to talking, and then I think, sometimes you just meet someone and then you talk to people, you kind of have what I was thinking is like the idea of a fabric with the same pattern, but with a different color, where you're like, hey. So that's why we got to talking, and then before you knew it, we were talking about loads of different stuff.
Tom, will you tell us a little bit about your story? Tell us what it is that you build. How did you get to doing what you're doing? However you want to take us there, go for it.
It kind of depends. When I say what I do, it depends a bit on who I'm talking to. There is, however, a big Venn diagram with me and like kindergarten teachers. But it's like the kindergarten teachers deal with a different demographic. I would say they have a different ICP, like ideal client profile. Those are generally a little smaller and have very specific problems about who gets to play with what toys. I deal with very similar ways of making people think about problems together and how to collaborate better, how to play better together. But I do it in a business context. And I started long ago as someone who did like agile coaching work. Didn't really know what that was, but someone was like, hey, do you want to do that? And then from there, I went to like thinking more about facilitation. And when I found facilitation, which is just like guiding groups through problems, I really found that I loved it. I was like, oh my God, this is the best. And I felt like I found like a skill that I didn't really knew I had. So I felt like I had a craft. Like I was working a lot with software engineers at the time, and I was always really jealous that they had like this thing that they could hone like a knife. And I would just like a people person, like marketing at that point. And that's why I was really happy to find that. And from there, I'm someone who gets bored real quick. So I got more and more into bigger facilitation things, bigger groups, multi-day. And then from there, I kind of took a little leap. And I thought, you know what? I can guide people through problems. But if I've got 18 hours with a group in a hotel, what are we going to do at 3 p.m.? Rather than just talking about strategic problems to solve. So from there, I kind of came into, okay, what does it mean if I think about a workshop like an experience? And from there, that's kind of how I did it. And now I run Tomfoolery, which is my freelance business, where I really work with moments at work. So it can be a team day way where I combine like some collaborative work, which is like how to work together better, and some strategic decisions wrapped in like some nice experiential foliage. Or maybe it's like you've got an all hands at work and it was great 3 years ago, but now it's not great and people don't like it. And I would then revitalize those rituals. Lastly, there's a company called Chaos Pilot, which is a Denmark sort of Montessori for adults. Just like kind of explore yourself, like be a change maker, etc. Through them, I teach experience design to people. So if they want to do those things I just mentioned, we go together for 3 days, we do some crazy stuff. I push them a bit, and then at the end, they can design experiences.
Those were some beautiful analogies, unsurprisingly. So we're going to zoom in on one of my 12 favorite problems, and we have decided we're going to discuss how might we rewrite broken soundtracks or limiting beliefs. So maybe we start for our connection points here. What do broken soundtracks and limiting beliefs have to do with learning experiences or moments at work? How is that piece so key to maybe this foliage and beyond?
I have strong opinions.
Great. You're on a
I would
podcast.
like
You can share
so
them.
I would like to take you to the idea of a wedding. Think about a wedding you've been at. And it's supposed to be, this beautiful moment between two adults there where they say, you know what, I'm going to spend my whole life with just you. And we're going to celebrate our relationship for one day in front of all of our friends and family. It's going to be amazing. They spend hours and hours and hours and hours preparing it. They spend thousands of dollars or euros where I'm from. I'm from Amsterdam, by the way. Hi. And they end up with remarkably similarly looking versions of the best day of their lives. Maybe an old timer that rides up, like a slightly badly improvised speech from a person that you really didn't want to hear it from, but you were a bit too sad to say no. And maybe like some white dress and some really pretty white flowers, right? But if you think about the original intent, where it's like, I want to have the best day of my life with the people I love, then it's kind of weird that weddings look alike so much. And my point extending, which is where the metaphor becomes reality, is I think that there's a lot. This is a really clear example of if you take a wedding and you take a totally different approach to that, and you really go like, what do I truly want? You'd probably come up with something else. But if you follow the tradition that is set and the risk aversion of making sure that people don't talk weirdly about you when they drive back in the car, it's like, I didn't like the thing where they all made us do a little spin. I think that's not, like that sort of stuff. Then you'd get something else. And my point is that you can extend that to stuff like company rituals or teen days or like a hackathon or like any learning experience, like a feedback workshop, that those patterns of tradition, making sure you don't do something that's too weird, can get in the way of the reason why you did it in the first place, right? Just like the wedding, you kind of end up with something that's a good idea, but doesn't really do the thing you want it to.
I love this, getting in the way of the reason you did it in the first place. Like coming back to the intention of why are we gathering? Why does this need to be a workshop? Why does this need to be a retreat? What is at the heart of this? And I wrote down, don't be weird, right? Like this is one of the thoughts. This is one of the like things that the limiting beliefs, maybe even in this, like don't be like.
I didn't like, don't be weird as something that holds you back.
Yes. It's
okay, because I thought I was like, is that the thing you took away from? Sure, yeah. Don't be weird, I guess.
Sorry, I should have prefaced a little bit more.
I
wrote down this idea that, like, in our mind, we're like, don't go too far. Don't be the person that people are talking about. To your point, like on the way back. And I think I've had that experience in some different ways because I was actually a teacher of 3-year-olds at one point. I've taught 3-year-olds now to corporate and university. And so now I have the full, like, there's very few gaps of ages and types of people that I have not been in charge of instructing in some sort of learning pathway. And one of the limiting beliefs of sorts that I had, that's even like almost hard to articulate now because I so dislike that this was in my mind, but was, I'm just a teacher. And like, first of all, at this point, it's like, no, teachers are incredible humans in all these different ways. So I hated that was there. But in fast forwarding to different parts where I was doing learning experience design, had a ton of experience by that point doing it, still in the back of my mind, when I wanted to do something that is like just for fun or was actually full of joy, or we were going to use colored pencils or something, I got in my mind that I was somehow being too fun, too light, too soft or something. And so that was one of those areas that thinking about the reason why we were doing whatever we were doing. There was a reason for the colored pencils if I got them out. But it took me a while to trust that and to trust the confidence, to have the confidence to know that, first of all, if somebody was thinking that, I at this point, I'm not sure that I care because I know why it is I'm doing what I'm doing. But I think that that has been my own journey. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for taking all the time to teach people useful concepts because it is indeed an amazing role to take. And I think, like, because I've struggled with this too, of course. I think everybody who does sort of, because I'm a facilitator by trade and now also an experience designer, but the thing is, you have a sort of, there's a point of it. It's like, am I being too much? Right? When is it like, ooh, when is it just being cutesy and I'm gonna make everybody make a golden thingy? Right? And that's really something I struggled with in the beginning. And I think the point is not to do something fun.
Mm-hmm.
The point is to do something from a place of care.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is you say, I think that this is what you should do now. I invite you to take this and see what comes out, right? And that might be something that is a little bit challenging, right? Or it's maybe something that's fun. But I think the point is not the form. The point is the intention. And that's also interesting because, and yeah, I'm being a bit like woo, but the intentionality parts is like, there's, I think, a difference between saying the words be intentional and there's the actual practicality of literally being intentional, which is to think, what is my intention and how do I execute it? Rather than just sort of a wafty word you can throw at someone when you want them to feel nice, right? Because you can know, like, you should really be intentional with how you spend your time. I have no idea how that works because I have raging ADHD, so I'm chaos ensued. But I do know how to make a decision about how people should spend their time together. And I think that's really the difference between how I got over that fear of I'm doing something cutesy. The best example I think I can give is way, way long ago in my facilitation journey. I was once facilitating like a day for a group of software engineers. And then one of them turned around and he said, hey, Tom, can you do one of those icebreaker things? Because I'm feeling a bit tired. And I'm like, because I was terrified of doing an icebreaker because I didn't want to be like that guy that does icebreakers. But when someone actually asked me for it, I was like, okay, this moment calls for it. I think I also completely messed that up because I think I made them do push-ups or something. But because I was like, but anyway, but it was nice because it's not about doing the fun thing, it's about doing the thing that's needed and having a bit of courage because you come from a place of objectivity to be that person that says, and now we use the purple pencils, and having the trust to say that and to do it. And sometimes it's with a 2-year-old. I just spent a weekend with a 2-year-old. They can be pretty challenging, I can tell you. Or with like a 44-year-old executive.
They're also very challenging.
They're also very challenging, and everything in the middle. So yeah, but the root is the same.
I want to pick up one of the roots that I think you laid down, which was doing it from a place of care. And I think that this to me is very central in also quieting the voices that can try to pull down what's happening, but doing it from a place of care to me, one of the reasons why this is central is because it takes the emphasis off of the facilitator or whoever is on the proverbial stage, even though the experiences that we run, I know we're not really on a stage, but whatever, somebody's guiding the things. And when we're thinking about whoever is coming to said learning experience and thinking about a place of care and being truly intentional about what they need and having done the work and the research and all the stuff that happens before we even get to planning a learning experience, then I think it becomes so much less about what the individual facilitator is doing or not doing, because if you start there, then those choices that you make become so much more clear in my experience. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Definitely. So another tiny step in my personal journey is that I worked at a software company called WeTransfer for about 5 years. And in that company, I was an internal facilitator. So people would just come to me and go like, hey, I have this problem and I want you to fix it. Like through a session, I didn't fix it. I just made people fix it by themselves. But what that gave me was a lot of access to people that understood the problems they were in and a lot of freedom to kind of bespoke my way through it. And what that gave me was a real deep understanding that you got to get to the core of the problem. And after that, everything clicks and gets a lot easier. But I think it is important that you spend that time to go like, okay, but what's the problem behind your problem? Wait, why are you saying that? You just made a weird face. And for instance, to double check that with someone else. And the thing is, once you feel like you're building up that picture, then the care becomes more intentional because you understand it. Whereas, and the thing is, that takes more time, right? When you're making a learning experience and like you're not doing like the learning needs analysis, and you're just like, oh, they want to have a feedback workshop, and the manager told me that they really are bad at it, and he's great at it, by the way. And then and if you ask a couple of people that are in their team, they might be like, oh my God, he's so defensive. And then, so it's about understanding, oh, wait, maybe we need to think about this a little bit differently. And maybe we need to talk about psychological safety in this team rather than a feedback workshop. And it's access and conversation that enable you to have the care to make that suggestion. And that suggestion can be anything.
Yeah, I've seen that to be so true and evolve over time. I think it's Kathy Moore that talks about the difference in being a pizza order taker as somebody who's involved in instructional design, and then being the one that you're talking about that's going in and having these conversations. And I can reflect on that little mini journey I've had in leading up to my clients, to when they come and ask, for example, a feedback workshop or something like that. We do similar types of work to be able to go back, because sometimes they'll even say, oh, we've done the needs analysis. Like, here it is in a 2-pager, like just build the thing. I'm like, well, why do you think in companies and, any place where humans are trying to work together and they're having these challenges, why, when they're thinking about a learning experience to help solve it, why do we skip that analysis and research? Like, what are some of the things that make us make the companies want to just go straight to the workshop, thinking that will be enough without the work underneath?
Tracy, that's a great question. And I have an optimistic answer with a pessimistic undertone.
Okay.
People love things to be simple. I think as humans, we are generally oriented to saying, this is my problem. However, humans working together is incredibly complicated. It's like a system. It's like it's like systems. It's like when you change one element of the system, and that could maybe be a person has a child and then they're really tired all the time. And because they're really tired, they might not be as complete in their manners as they were 3 months ago. And because of that, the junior that's also in the team gets a bit feisty. And then someone else it's hard to predict where problems sometimes come from. But that's a really unsatisfying answer, right? Because it means that it's kind of really hard to tell where problems sometimes come from. And businesses are really built on this idea of efficiency and how long something should take, and that we should have a clear a cause and effect. And if you're selling something, especially if they're a consultant, and you're like, I've got the problem, you've got a problem, I've got a solution, and we're going to come together and it's going to be great. And that's true. But that's why if you do that work, oftentimes before I do those difficult conversations where I try to get the meaning out of the meaning, my workshop design or my learning experience design, is usually workshops, is a lot more straightforward. But when I do the conversation, it becomes a lot more complicated. So it actually is making my work a lot harder. But then, of course, it's the result where you see that you're actually saying, I'm going to listen to the people that have problems. I'm going to take care to create something bespoke, not super bespoke, but just something that is a bit more fitted to their needs. And then they'll be like, oh, finally. Like, finally, we're getting somewhere. And I think that it's that feeling that really makes me accept the fact that sometimes I have to look at my wall as I, like, you know, and I just kind of go like, oh God, what am I going to do, etc. So it's worth it.
It's worth
just like
it.
Teaching children and going a bit further and understanding the lesson that they need to learn rather than the one that parents would like you to.
I think, Tom, it's this finally we're getting somewhere that drives me to continue to do the work. That sense of progress and that sense of possibility. I'm a very, you may already recognize this, like idealistic person. Like I see potential and possibility and tend to work on things about dreaming and building, you know, future possibility. So I think that like root or that idea of what is the potential out there makes the work on the other side, to your point, worth it. Because I can see where we can go. And yeah.
I mean, I know this is a very of course we love potential, right? It's like no one's gonna be like, I don't love potential, but the feeling that you get when you see someone click, where you feel like, for instance, like, I don't know, if for instance, thinking about teamwork, if you have a bad relationship at work, it's a bit toxic, it's getting a bit worse, it's kind of spiraling, it can be a really negative impact on your life. The day where you go and you discuss like how things can be better, or maybe like get to connect with someone that you have this kind of difficult relationship with, it can be like a ripple that then makes it better. You know, maybe not, right? But just having that impact, when you feel it, when you see it, because sometimes, because I used to work internally, I would see that over time, you know. It's really satisfying and it's really addictive.
Tom, let's go further into the idea of the soundtracks and the limiting beliefs. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what is it that people overcomplicate about this topic? Sometimes the sentence stem that people like, should you choose to use one, is if only people knew. So if only people knew, when it comes to the things we've been discussing and some of these ideas around soundtracks or limiting beliefs.
I think if I were to summarize the conversation we were having, it would be, if only people remembered why they wanted to create a moment together in the first place, rather than just considering the need for something and then using the most generic, traditionally acceptable way of doing it. Because that has a tendency to kind of solve your problem, but not really. So that's how you get to an escape room to try to build your team, rather than to just have a nice conversation. Whereas in the beginning, the thing you really wanted to do was, wouldn't it be nice if we got to know each other a little bit better? And the way you solve it is by going to an escape room. You know, maybe it works, but it's also not really the thing you wanted to do in the first place. So just think about, if only people knew why they wanted to do a thing, and then keep that reason in mind when they decide what to do, rather than just picking the thing.
It's making me think about the container. Maybe sometimes people start with the container itself and they're like, this is the workshop container. And there are preconceived notions about the workshop container. And we bring sticky notes. I don't have anything against sticky notes. I use a lot of sticky notes, but we must have sticky notes and we must have an icebreaker, and it must go like this in some way because that's what people expect.
So to come to my first book recommendation, In the Art of Gathering by Priya Parker.
One of my favorites.
It's a classic. It's great. It was a pandemic hit, and it continues to inspire people across the globe. She talks about letting formalities and logistics rule the gateway rules of a gathering or a workshop. And I think another example I can give from my personal existence is like a dinner party. The idea of having a dinner party is that you're going to spend great time with great friends, sitting around a table, eating good food.
Mm-hmm.
But what sometimes happens is the person that's responsible for cooking is super duper stressed out
Mm-hmm.
because they have to manage a lot of different things and they have all these expectations about making like the best macaroni and cheese that you've ever experienced. But then the original intent of a dinner party, which is to share stories, have some time to really properly catch up, like that kind of gets degraded just because we have this extra rule of a dinner party equals that you get really impressed with food. Whereas if I asked you, why are you having this dinner party? No one is going to say, because I really want to impress people with my incredible cooking. Sometimes, but often it's about the friends. So there's loads of different examples, which are also in business, which have the same idea, right, behind this, which is just like, which is just exactly like this sort of, why'd you do it in the first place? Like, don't ask about work if you want to know how someone's doing personally, you know, like.
This is connected to an idea that I was thinking about as we've been talking of good controversy. Do you know this
Mhm.
term?
Yeah.
Looking for good controversy. I'm wondering if we can maybe unpack this, because when you're thinking about the true intention of what you're doing, to me, good controversy has helped me to recognize that there are times where I want to design for uncomfortable conversations because that's what really needs to happen. And that can be tricky. But anyway, I'm curious of your thoughts about good controversy.
So something about good controversy, right, is that I am a person that likes intense experiences, like personally. Like I like to like walk around Scotland without a phone for 5 days, like, or maybe do like a meditation retreat that lasts really long, or maybe like go do a marathon, like just to sort of taste extreme parts of life, because I think that's personally interesting because there's sort of intensity there. And for a long time, I couldn't really, I just thought that that was something fun that I did.
Mm,
But then I started to notice, wait a minute, there's parts of these experiences that I find so meaningful that I can integrate in
mm,
some of that business work that I do. And the example I give is a couple years ago, I was doing the big company gathering for WeTransfer, a software company that deals with file transferring. There were like 300 people there.
mm,
And we wanted to do something together, and I had to think about what to do. And what I eventually made them do is I gave them all instructions of how to make origami cranes, and I told them to start folding. And I don't know if you've ever folded origami cranes before, but it's really frustrating if you don't know how to do it. Because I didn't give them any detailed experiences, right? But they were in groups of eight, 300 people trying to do this at the same time, and they hated it. But at every table, as it progressed, people maybe already knew how to do it, 1 out of 8, or like maybe some people had like a little bit of extra skill, or they got there. And then once they got over this hump of being very frustrated, they started to help each other get somewhere. And then eventually we ended up creating like 1,000 cranes, or maybe like, I don't know, slightly less ambitious number, but let's just say 1,000. And it was a really nice moment. And I think the allegory I was trying to make with that experience is that the experience of working together is often quite frustrating, like the day to day. Like it's hard, projects take long, someone makes an annoying comment in a meeting. But then at the end of the day, you look back and you're like, wow, I did something really cool,
mm,
right? Whereas often the experiences that you have when you try to do like collaborative work
mhm,
is like, let's all do like some charades, or like let's get drunk together, or like build a cocktail. So I think thinking about good controversy for me is to not be too worried about generating negative emotions while doing work like designing experiences or learning experiences, because real life is often, well, a
mm.
little unsatisfying in its ways before you get through it, the thing you're at. And that's why I think that is where good controversy can have a place. And
Mm.
yeah, so it's, I think that's the excuse I tell myself as I make people do uncomfortable things.
We're so concerned oftentimes in people liking the thing that we did, that we have to be able to hold, to your point, the negative emotions that lead to the outcome. Like, of course, intentional negative emotions, not unintentional. And if you're going to go into deep negative emotions, you have to know what you're doing to be able to land the plane and like put everybody back together. But,
Exactly.
I think in this productive, maybe productive frustration and purpose, it is connected to this theme of, I keep going back to intentionality, knowing when you are guiding from that place of care and knowing where you're trying to collectively take the group or individuals, or allow them to access feelings and ideas that they couldn't apart from the experience. That is a lot of power to hold and use wisely as a facilitator and learning experience designer. That's a bit of what that was making me think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and the thing is, I didn't just come up with most of this
Yes.
work. Although that would be nice, it would definitely be good for my ego. But I think for me, like, I just randomly went on like an experience design course for Chaos Pilots, but it really changed my perspective about where you start the design process. Like, do you start the design process from like an exercise based approach, which is I'm going to make them do this, and then that's going to have an effect, versus kind of a feelings perspective first, which is what Andy Sontag, a friend of mine and someone who is very active in the experience design space. He's taught me a lot. He's really a great guy. But he says you should think about the feelings first, about what you want people to experience, and then try to pick something that kind of relates back to that in that moment. So maybe it's the beginning where you want people to have a specific idea about what they're coming for, like, and that for me was a real paradigm shift in the freedom I experienced with kind of the creative outlet. Thinking, how am I going to make you all feel frustrated? It's a great challenge.
So does that have any potential connection points to the drawings behind you?
Uh, yeah, I've got 4 values as Tomfoolery, my company. One is, and this is, I think, of course, it doesn't. It's more. I think it will tie into this conversation we're having generally because it's kind of the same things I try to advocate for. One is efficacy, not efficiency, but efficacy. Does the thing solve the problem? 2 is intuitiveness. Like, are you using your body to decide what to do or what the room needs? Because there's a lot of designing, but if someone throws a tantrum in the middle of your session, you got to act in a way that's exciting, right? And of course, tantrum is maybe a bad example, but there's countless others of having to have to react in the moment. And then I've got unusual, because I think there's some value in being unusual. It's not being weird. It's just saying, I see that you're doing something and I'm going to do something a little bit different. And the last one is something that's maybe a bit connected to my own personality because I'm myself, is rousing. Like, how do you rouse people? And what happens when they get roused? Like, they get injected with this sort of energy that then can lead somewhere. It makes me very, very excited. So those are some of the things that are in the
I
thing
love
behind
that.
me.
Is there anything else that, as we've been discussing and talking about these areas of focus and this intentionality, that you want to share more about, or anything else that is on your mind in connection?
I think I have 2.
Let's do it.
One is on my mind, and one is a call to action.
Ooh.
So I know that discussing these types of things, where I sit here to say like all the ways you're doing things is bad, and you should do them totally differently and creatively, and it should be like wow, and everybody should be making origami cranes and like being frustrated, but then being like having this feeling of like relief about understanding the reality of being in business together. Don't be intimidated by the creative aspect of designing experiences or rethinking how meetings or offsite should work. But we started this call out of is saying it's about care. It's about sitting down, thinking, what do you need? So understanding who you're doing it for and then doing it, right? And having courage to go, no, this is what we're going to do. So if you are in a situation at work or in your personal life where, for instance, you have like a conversation with your family that just isn't really going very well because you're always talking about the same stuff, maybe think about what do we need? And then to think about how that is a first step. And oftentimes, so for instance, it's maybe a different intro question. I ask people how their day was versus how you are. Because how you are is like a really complicated question to answer. But how your day was is a lot easier to answer. And it gives me a lot of information about how you're doing, right? So it's very small steps. That's one. So that's my thing. So start small. Don't talk to people about that you're doing it. Just do it. And then say, hey, by the way, I did that. Rather than, should we as a group think about how to make our meetings, our moments more intentional? No, don't do that. Just do it. And then say, aha, I did that. Congratulations. You fell for it. And now, etc. Number two is something that I thought about when thinking about this podcast, which is, if you are more ambitious and you want to get some inspiration, where do you get it from? Because it's all one thing to be like a corporate maverick going like, I will make everything fun and different. But where do you get your inspiration from? And the places where I get my inspiration from are like, I do a year-long foraging workshop where I just get told how to eat different plants in the Dutch like parks, and like how to grow roots, and then I cook with them and I meet people, right? But the thing is, it's not necessarily about the foraging. I would not be, even after 8 sessions, I have no idea what to eat and what not to eat, and I'll probably get some sort of ingestion problem or not worse. For me, it's about how is this experience of like giving me a really old thing that we forgot about, how do they repackage that into something that's expecting? That's a really different approach to business, but it has a lot of the same elements. Another example might be to go to like, those art people, like, like art students, like really serious art people. They do loads of workshops, but they use it totally differently. And they talk about it differently. And they say about, let's explore the interconnectedness of how our like corporate society is intertwined with la, 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 right? But the thing is that in that, there's a totally different paradigm about how they do the work they do, and you can steal from it. So what I try to do is open myself up to experiences that are not connected to the context in which I am doing, but I am connected to like as a profession.
Thank you so much for really taking us to the thoughtful places of pausing and considering the work that we're doing and the experiences that we're a part of. Would you like to share any other book recommendations, podcast recommendations, and then tell people where they can find you if they want to work with Tomfoolery?
I will. I've got two things. One is called, there's The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan. Chip.
Yes. Dan and Chip Heath.
And Dan Heath. It's just a really nice, if you're just like, I don't really want to get into experience design, but I want to know what it's all about, read that. You're not going to learn how to do it, but you're going to be like swooned. And second, this is my friend Andy gave this to me, and it's called The Book of Symbols. And it's just a big archive of like hand, and then it talks to you about all the ritualistic.
You gotta move this way a little bit in the like.
I'm so sorry. So sorry. It's called The Book of Symbols. It's also, sorry about this. It's really thick, and the only thing it does is it just gives you like a random object and its artistic significance throughout history. And what it does is it just gives you a lot of very practical inspiration that is not connected. So you can literally look at any object like sword, elephant, window, door, and then you can use that for inspiration. So those are two things. If you want to learn more about experience design in general, the World Experience Organization is a great place to start. I'm a member of that. It's great. If you want to go like, people say this, but I have no idea what it means. There, they actually do it. I give a course on experience design every once in a while in Amsterdam. And if you want to work with me, I live at tomfoolery.co. So that's TOM foolery.co. And I'd love to do some work about moments at work or experience design. It's that's who I am, and that's where you can find me. And also, if you're ever in Amsterdam and you see a curly man, make sure to wave, because you never know. Maybe it's me.